Hello, everyone. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to be talking with you all today, and we'll be getting started in just a moment. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, welcome. Thanks again for joining us for our workshop on moving from talk to action and what's next initiatives. So this is part of our sort of pilot workshop series for our What's Next America workshops. This we have had a couple workshops already in this series on organizing What's Next initiatives and facilitating them. And then next week we'll have the final workshop in the series, which will be on capturing impact. So that'll be same time next week. Um, on Thursday, June 18th. So if you are able to make that one, we'd love to see you there as well. Let's see, and then June 19th, the day after that, I wanted to also mention that we're going to be hosting our first community of practice gathering. And so really excited about that. And that's an opportunity for folks who are, working on talk to action deliberative initiatives or any kind of interest in What's Next America to come together and kind of share learning across the network of practitioners and folks doing this work. So you're welcome to join that as well. We'd love to have you. And we also wanted to mention we'll be starting a new series of workshops in late July, early August that is going to be informed by what we've been learning from all of you in this first pilot series. And so just wanted to kind of preview that. We haven't set those on the calendar yet, but we'll be doing that very shortly. So let's see. Let's move to our agenda today. There we go. So yeah, today we are going to start with just a brief overview, NIFI and deliberation for anyone who's not familiar. I think probably several of you are, but we'll go over that very briefly. And then we'll continue with a brief overview of What's Next America. And then we'll jump right into our sort of panel discussion with our featured speakers today. Really excited about that. And we'll have some time for question and answers, discussion following that. And then we'll make sure to save some time to share some of the tools that we've been developing that are specific to sort of supporting this moving from talk to action. And then we'll end with some reflections. Throughout, please feel free to ask questions by either raising your Zoom hand if you want, or put questions in the chat. This is a small enough group we can sort of have this be more conversational, so that'll be really great. So ask any questions that you'd like, or share any, insights or reflections that you have from your practice as well. We'll aim to end at the hour or before, but with the option for folks to stay on afterwards to ask questions or discuss anything. So just for planning purposes there. I wanted to share this. We'll ask you in a few minutes because it's a small enough group to actually introduce yourself, where you're from, or where you're located now, and maybe one of these, if any of these questions speak to you, sort of what does dialogue or deliberation work, if any, is happening in your community or your context right now, maybe on campus or wherever you're doing your work. What does that currently look like, and what do you hope to see in the future for that? Or just kind of what questions are you grappling with about this kind of talk to action work? So just wanted to give you a brief moment to think about that. And in the meantime, I wanted to introduce our featured speakers today. So we're so excited and honored that we'll be able to kind of learn from and talk to these very accomplished folks. So first, I wanted to introduce Linda Seals. Linda is the vice chair of the NIFI board currently. She is a regional extension educator at University of Florida. IFAS Extension, and co-leads Florida's Community Development Program and the Community Voices Informed Choices, or CIVIC program. So we're thrilled to have Linda here. Alberto Olivas is a current member of the NIFI board and is a founding executive director of the Congressman Ed Pastor Center for Politics and Public Service at Arizona State University. And he has served in appointed leadership roles for state government in areas of equal opportunity, civic engagement, leads trainings on civic education and public dialogue as well. And then last but not least, Betty Knighton. Betty is the former president of the National Issues Forums Institute, and she has served for many years as the executive director of the West Virginia Center for Civic Life, where she worked with partners on launching What's Next West Virginia, which you'll hear more about later today as well. Okay, so with that, hopefully that's given you a few moments here to think about. So I'm gonna actually just stop sharing for a moment so we can see each other for a bit. And so, yeah, maybe let's go around and if anyone wants to go first, feel free to come off mute um, and introduce yourself if you wouldn't mind. Or I can pick someone. um, maybe Walter, would you mind going first?
Walter Fisher. I'm participating out of Chicago. Um, what else would you like to know?
Oh, yeah, just kind of if you are aware of any or involved in any sort of dialogue or deliberation kind of projects or work in your community or wherever you're kind of working or living, and if so, kind of, or if not, like what would you like to see in that area in the future?
Um, so the answer is I'm not currently involved in any work. Um, my background is in facilitation. Um, I identify as a dialogue facilitator. The scope of my work has been education, K through 12, law enforcement, primarily on the East Coast, but also here in Chicago, uh, domestically and internationally, primarily in Germany, but in six other countries. And I've been doing that work for 30 years.
Wow. Well, we are so honored to have you here. Thank you. And Elisa, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Annalisa. I am the Civic Engagement Coordinator at Sam Houston State University from Huntsville, Texas. So representing Huntsville right now. We have some deliberative dialogues on campus, and I really enjoy seeing the students, actually get out there and get involved. And that's kind of my experience with them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Radius, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Radius Guest, and I'm in the Twin Cities, Minnesota. And there is always a deliberative dialogue. There is always a conversation. There is always a debate happening here in Minnesota, from George Floyd to ICE to whatever. And so I am the DEI director at the University of Minnesota. I also do a lot of consulting on the side. I got introduced to the National Issues Forum several years ago. And so I was just excited to reconnect with you. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Amy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Bloom. I am a civic educator for my whole life in various capacities, K-12, college. And I found the deliberative space really a great way to educate for democratic public life. Most of my work has been in K-12 social studies at the administrator level. But I went back into a classroom my last 3 years, and I used deliberation, and I have a couple grants that I'm the trainer. I'm a trainer for the grant for the community to learn how to facilitate. So that's a roundabout way to saying I'm also a research scholar at Wayne State University Center for the Study of Citizenship, focusing on deliberative democracy. But I'm going to tell you, my COVID babies are kids that have gone through COVID and developed, had to grow up during this crazy decade. My heart breaks for them. So this has been really good because they're gaining connection and a sense of belonging that these kids do not have. And coming out of COVID, they definitely, depending on what age group they were, their social emotional development is stilted, their brain development is changed from what we experienced. There's all kinds of research coming out. So there's 100 ways that this should be what K-12 is doing. 110. And I was able to use deliberation to be the center of a high school course, which was so much fun. And the kids actually got to action. So, when young people have an idea, and you just say, well, that's great, we can do that, but we need to be able to do this. They make it happen. So I'm glad to be with you because always looking for implementation. How do you move from those ideas? So,
yeah. So thanks so much, Amy. Good to see you. Let's see. Got Jelena. Maybe if you're able to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jelena Tunstill. I'm the Program and Operations Coordinator for the Community Advancement Network in Austin. And we actually do have a training called From Dialogue to Action that we started as a response to folks taking race equity trainings and not really knowing what to do with what they learned in those trainings. So I'm here to kind of learn about what you all do and see if it could be implemented in any of our trainings.
Thank you so much. Let's see. Greg, if you are able to come off mute.
Hi, my name's Greg Phelps. I'm from Kentucky, but I'm currently in Arkansas, and I'm taking a break from mowing. So I'm sitting on my front porch facing a highway, and any minute a log truck might go by. So I'll try to do this really fast. Anyway, so I've been involved with Kettering and NIFI as my kind of involvement in dialogue and deliberation for off and on for a number of years. And currently, I'm not really doing a whole lot except kind of managing a Facebook group that's kind of a remnant of a Center for Public Life that I started a few years ago when I'm still in education.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks. Nice, great to connect with you. And last but not least, Melissa.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Melissa Sergi. I'm the coordinator for community service and civic engagement here at SUNY Brockport. I've been on a few of these What's Next America calls. Really looking forward to continuing today. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You all are just amazing. I want to learn from all of you. But yeah, so today I'm gonna reshare my screen here. Oh, we did hear from Greg. So I'm gonna reshare my screen here and we'll move along to the next slide. Okay, so just brief overview. I know some of you who have been with us on these calls before have heard this, so apologize, but we'll be quick. So NIFI, National Issues Forums Institute, NIF, kind of has a lot of names, but basic premise of kind of our core belief here is that solving public problems requires public participation. So NIFI's been around for, as many of you know, more than 40 years and sort of work from this premise that democracy is strengthened when people are equipped not just to talk together, but to decide and act together on issues that affect their life. So to do that, to support that effort, we work to equip, empower, and mobilize people to use deliberation to take action for the public good. So deliberation, as many of you know, is both a civic practice and a decision-making process. That's how we think of it here anyways. Deliberation strengthens democracy when individuals or institutions, groups, communities find ways to talk and act together with one another. deliberation helps people understand sort of the complexities of how issues affect their lives, other people's lives, the values that underlie their perspectives and other people's perspectives on those issues, how those values are in tension with each other often. It helps people weigh different options and approaches to address an issue and the trade-offs involved in each approach. And then make decisions together about, what makes the most sense given these competing concerns. And then can lead to, individuals and groups, communities to take action on different issues. So the name that we sort of put to that process is, and this sort of action-oriented purpose of deliberation is talk, decide, act. So we'll hear today about multiple ways that, including What's Next America, but other ways as well that deliberative talk to action work can look. And so we wanted to just note that some, recent research that's come out, this was by More in Common, really supports this idea that people, Americans, really want to connect, not just, they want to connect across difference, but they don't just want to do that by talking to each other about the differences. A lot of people actually want to work together on issues that in their community that affect people across these differences, and they want to work together to address those in their communities. So What's Next America provides a set of practices that responds to this very need to create more opportunities for people to do this work together. So it invites people to talk together, identify ways to improve their communities, and take actions to do that. Those of you who are familiar with deliberation may sort of recognize the different elements of a deliberative discussion in the What's Next approach. So it involves, examining different approaches, working through tensions among the different perspectives and values, considering the trade-offs of a wide range of these approaches, reflecting on sort of commonalities and differences among values and opinions about what to do, and then identifying that common ground to take action. But there are some differences too in this approach, and so in the What's Next approach, it looks a little bit different from a standard NIFI issue guide because for the participants in the discussion essentially frame the issue, that framing process, but they do that together during the discussions as they walk through these 3 series of deliberative question sets that are organized under these 3 overarching questions. Where are we now? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? What's Next America as an approach grew out of work that was done in West Virginia. So we'll hear more about that from Betty later today, and also work that was done in Alabama. And so sometimes, people would get to the end of a deliberative discussion and literally ask, what's next? So they wanted to, just like that research was suggesting, they want to actually do something together. And as some of you were talking about in your introductions as well. So during our panel today, you'll hear more from Betty about what's next as one method to move from talk to action, but this is just one approach to, deliberative talk to action work. And so one of the things we'd like to highlight today, as we hear from all of our panelists, is the different forms that deliberative talk to action work can take. So we encourage adaptation of what's next, the what's next process to fit communities' sort of needs and goals. And we're excited to be able to talk today about the variety of ways that, other ways that you can do talk to action work as well, and how these ways can kind of learn from and support each other. So I will now turn it over to Christine, who is our communications and creative manager, and who will lead us through some questions that she'll ask our panelists, and so we can hear a little bit more about what they've learned and their experiences in their work. So I'm going to actually stop sharing these slides for a moment and see if I can spotlight our speakers here. But Christine, you can go ahead while I'm doing that.
Sounds good. Yeah, well done is doing that. Thank you everyone for being here. Really appreciate your presence. And thank you especially to our panelists. I'm really excited to talk through, what this looks like on the ground in terms of moving from talk to action with each of you. So, just to start off, simple here. Can each of you kind of go through and just introduce yourselves and your work and the context that you work in as well? We can start with Alberto.
Everyone, buenas tardes. My name is Alberto Olivas. I'm a professor of practice in the School of Public Affairs here at Arizona State University. But I've been involved with originally Kettering Foundation and NIFI over 20 years. And came to it as a former state government do-gooder public relations guy that wa- I really found through my involvement with NIFI style moderation that most of the time the way we engage the public is wrong and bad and harmful, and really just kind of serves to ratify decisions that have already been made by other people and put the stamp of public engagement on it, and it was damaging the community. So it's been a wonderful journey of discovering more legitimate ways to engage the public in thinking through identifying problems and identifying solutions and involving actors at the community level to get involved and not just say, well, your job is to vote, but your job is to actually be part of the solution. So it's led to wonderful things. And I'm excited to talk to you about what we've learned along the way.
Thanks, Alberto. Linda, do you want to go next? And then Betty
Sure.
after.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here today. Yeah, so I work for Cooperative Extension, and perhaps you've heard of Cooperative Extension. We are literally an extension of the university, and we're all in all 50 states and Puerto Rico. And I think we have the US Virgin Islands as well. I think we have extension. And so our jobs are to take research-based information from the university and teach the communities the science-based practices that they can use to make their lives better. So the work I'm doing in Florida with deliberative dialogue is really outside of the traditional extension model, because usually we're teaching people how to grow bigger and better tomatoes, and we're teaching them how to prevent diabetes and how to create a budget. So, this is really different work. And, it's been challenging to get support from the university. Not that they don't support it, but they don't understand it. And so getting support from the university has been a real challenge, but they're starting to catch on and they're starting to see the value. And I think, for us in extension, we're very action oriented, right? So all the work we do, the educational programs we teach, the success of them are reliant upon what participants do once they leave the classroom. So that was a challenge for us when we started doing deliberative dialogue, because we really needed to be able to see, what do people do after they leave the forum? And so I wouldn't say we're great at that yet, but I think we're getting better and we're making greater strides in that area. But recently we've restructured extension in Florida. And I'm telling you this because Civic has landed at the forefront of important extension programs and initiatives, meaning that we are finally starting to get some support to do this work. And that is really exciting to me. I think administrators have finally seen the light, and they see the importance of getting people in the communities involved. And to Alberto's point, our local governments really struggle to engage people. They more and more grants are asking for a lot of engagement, community engagement in the grants. And so a lot of our local governments really don't know how to do that. It's always been it's always just been, they'll ask a few people, and those few people are usually the same people who are always showing up at a commission meeting, right? And so, we've reached a point where we realize that we need to do things differently, and we need to really, really, truly, meaningfully engage people. And I think deliberative dialogue is one way to do that for sure.
Thanks, Linda. Betty, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Well, I'm very happy to be joining you today from my home here in Charleston, West Virginia. Very glad it's air conditioned, because the heat index is going to be about 100 later this afternoon. So we will all keep cool, I hope. I can say that over the years, and it's been about 30 some years here in West Virginia, we've learned more and more about people's instinct and need to understand problems better than they do, to work with people they don't normally get a chance to work with, to understand perspectives different than their own. Now, that's not everyone. I wish I could say it would be everyone, but more and more people are seeing that either through their education that they've had in their college, through their interactions in the community, when public problems arise and they don't have a sense of who's working together to address this. And so many years ago in West Virginia, we developed a nonprofit, a very small nonprofit called the West Virginia Center for Civic Life. And in that development, we developed partnerships with media, with nonprofits, with faith groups, with agencies, with healthcare organizations, just always saying, what are the issues that are facing people here in West Virginia that we can find more productive ways to talk about? Also, aligned with that, we were very aware of the work that was being done at the national level through the National Issues Forums Institute and the way that issues were framed so that people could have a chance to be in conversation about issues, and that not only were different points of view tolerated, they were welcomed. They were like pulled out of people in a way, like, why would you think differently? Why might somebody else have a different point of view? So that process was very appealing to a lot of people, all the way from middle school and high school students, all the way up to people through all walks of life. So that has led to more public participation. The more public participation, the more the demand has been for how do we act on this? This is really helpful. We learned something from each other. I didn't know, I learned something about myself in this discussion. This energy is kind of is growing. We don't want it to dissipate. We don't want that to go away. How can we take that energy that we've experienced through talking together to act together? So that was a step that we've taken here in West Virginia many decades ago, and it led to the formation, and I'll say more about this one later, about What's Next West Virginia, which is about talking together and then planning action together, and then for those who are willing, taking those actions.
That's wonderful. And Betty, you've already touched on this a little bit here already, but one critique we hear over and over about deliberation is that it's just more talk. So, what role do you see deliberation playing in decision making and collaborative problem solving, especially on campuses and communities? Betty, you can go, and then Alberto, Linda, feel free to
Sure.
pop in after.
I think when we talk about deliberation as this new skill that you need to learn, people don't necessarily relate to it, and it doesn't get applied in those areas that you suggested, like when they're really trying to make progress on an issue. When it feels like a more natural process, which it really is in our everyday lives. I mean, we deliberate all the time in our families, with our friends. We have options, we have approaches, we have to talk them through, we have to decide what to do. So what I think is helpful is to make it as many entry points as possible for people to participate, to make it as clear as possible what people are, what the point is, instead of making it like a very academic exercise, even though it may very well be carried out in an academic setting. And then also continually broaden the circle. It's all about bringing people together that aren't normally involved, people who are most affected by an issue, who often are the least likely to be involved in addressing it. So it's just trying to make it as user-friendly and as open-armed as possible.
And go ahead, Alberto and Linda as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you said it perfectly, Betty. I really appreciate that because, again, we've been criticized here in Florida for that as well. And we being, my team, we still struggle sometimes to keep, because we're working with the community, not with students. So when working with the community, we still struggle to remove that academic tone, right? When we write in an issue guide, it's like we have this tendency to be the experts in the room. And I'm really working hard on convincing everyone that we're not the experts. We really need to frame these issues the way that the community talks about them. And that's so important because the actions and things that we come up with in these issue guides really need to resonate with people. And they need to see that these are actions that they can take. These aren't actions that someone else out there is going to do, but they're actions that you can take. And so that's where we're really starting to put the emphasis, even as we develop issue guides. What are the things that we can do? And sometimes it's as simple as just writing a letter to an elected official, where sometimes it's a lot more complex. Maybe it's forming a 501c3 nonprofit to do work in this area, whatever the issue is. So I appreciate that.
Can you restate the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, we hear over and over that deliberation is just more talk. So, what role do you see deliberation playing in moving more towards the action and the decision making and the collaborative problem solving in campuses and communities?
Oh, yeah. Well, part of it is healing the relationship between the governed and the government. People typically don't interact with government until they're pissed off and they find out about something that's already been decided. And all they can do is yell and scream and threaten to get people kicked out of office or this and that. It really is about reestablishing norms for how government should communicate, and not just government. That's my area of expertise, but also the nonprofit sector and business leaders. How do we reimagine a relationship that's an ongoing conversation with the community so they're not surprised by things and they have the opportunity to be partners with us in solving problems and feel heard. And fundamentally, that's what I've learned is that people misbehave and engage in undesirable forms of civic engagement when they feel unheard. They behave in ways that to elected officials and government representatives are scary and intimidating or just nasty. And that's a symptom of feeling disregarded, invisible, and unheard. So when we can reset the expectations of how and when we come to the public on things, it fundamentally changes that dynamic. The big story that comes to mind is we were invited to do a training for city leaders in a little town in Nevada, outside of about an hour north of Las Vegas, called Pahrump, Nevada. And the issue was they had people coming to their town council meetings with rifles, threatening because they were so angry. There was a lot of tension between the people that had lived in that town for generations and all the newcomers that were changing things too quickly, and people just didn't feel heard. They were angry, and that's how they were forcing town leaders to see them and reckon with them, was with this very, very violent rhetoric and demonstrations. And so they wanted to learn how could they approach public engagement in ways that were healthier, sustainable, and lowered the temperature on all of these things. It was frankly a delightful experience to be part of that. So I think it does go back to things like Betty's mentioned, being thoughtful about who's involved, and not relying on the old traditional passive public engagement models where we just put information out there and see who shows up, because that's where we get the usual suspects, the uh, well-educated, more affluent retirees who have the time and the education to know how to participate in public processes. And we're not getting the people that need to be in those conversations, working class, lower income folks that probably don't even know that the thing is happening. So how can we have intentional strategies for engaging the public where we start with thinking about who needs to be represented? What voices do we need at the table? And how do we design a process to make sure that they can participate, that they know about it, that they trust the process, that we're involving partners that are meaningful for them, and that we're not doing it when they're at work, all those kinds of things. So it's all of the above.
That's really helpful, Alberto, for bringing it to what this looks like on the ground. So, kind of going more in that vein. No, for someone who's wanting to just start from scratch in terms of starting this work on their university, on their campus, or in their communities, what does that process look like? And do you have any advice for folks in that situation? And Alberto, if you want to start, and then we can go Linda and Betty after.
I don't know if you should start with me. I can be a little gloom and doom about this because I've seen many efforts start beautifully and then fizzle out quickly. So it's really important to think about institutional support and how you tie this work to institutional priorities. So if in the college and university environment, if these dialogue and deliberation efforts aren't seen as being really critically associated with issues like footsie, like student enrollment, retention, completion, graduation, student engagement outcomes and metrics, things like that. If it's just seen as a nice thing we do for the community, it's in trouble. Because as soon as there's budget cuts or leadership change, it's likely to be eliminated. So we were really successful when I worked for the community colleges. It's that old saying, one of the best things that can happen to you is to have a good adversary. We had a trustee on the board of our governing board for our college district that hated all our civic engagement stuff and thought it was hidden liberal agenda and wanted to get rid of it. So we knew what we were doing was popular and supported by the community. So we conducted a series of community forums in every district in our county and got feedback from the public, asking them questions related to, do you think civic engagement and dialogue and deliberation is an important part of a college degree in Arizona? And in every district, the most conservative districts and as well as the progressive districts, every district resoundingly said, not only is it a critical aspect of higher education, but it's more needed than ever. And then we asked them for examples of that. What does it look like? What should students be able to do? What kind of experience should students have related to civic engagement and civic education? And we got a lot of examples from people that we were then able to thematically sort and turn those into outcome statements that were then adopted by our governing board. So that matters because outcome statements for community colleges are how you're accredited. So every 10 years, when you have to be reaccredited by your governing body, they look at what you say you do and how you collect data that supports that you do what you say you do. And so we now had some real tangible civic engagement and civic education outcome statements based in community feedback with overwhelming support that then we could hold faculty and administrators to and say, this is adopted. We're responsible, we're accountable to do this, and we need to be able to do things that will generate the data that every 10 years we can say we've accomplished this. So that does drive decision making and resource allocation. But if it's just a service, if it's just a nice thing, it's vulnerable. And I've seen time and time again when it's not tied to teaching and learning for higher ed institutions, it doesn't last. For community nonprofits, you got to look again at how closely tied is it to your mission statement and to your funding sources. What is your funding model? How does it support that? But wherever you are, you have to look at, what is the sustainability of this and how closely tied is it to our reason for existing?
That's great. Linda, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, can you repeat the question again?
Yes, absolutely. So for folks wanting to start this from
Okay,
scratch
that's right.
on their
That's right.
campuses, yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. I think, when we started this in Florida in extension, we started because a partner, a future partner, came to us and said, we're really struggling with getting different people to be involved in this issue. And the issue was water quality in a really important water body here in Florida. And well, we were experts on water quality. We really weren't experts at the time in engagement, and that's, we found our way to deliberative dialogue in many different routes. We got there and found out about it. And so, finding a champion in the community was a real important part of this. And we did find someone in a local small town who was running for public office, and he was really concerned about his constituents who were eating the fish that they were catching from some canals leading into this water body. And if you'd see some of these canals, you would probably think to yourself, or maybe even say out loud, oh yeah, I'm not even touching that water, right? Because it's really gross looking. So he was really concerned. And so we presented to him this idea of bringing people together in the community and let's talk about it. Let's just talk about this issue. And that's what we did. We brought people together and we had some business owners, we had some elected officials, we had some faith-based people, we had some educators. So we had some good variety of people in the room and talked about the issue and, found that having that champion in that soon to be elected official was so critical because he's the one who knew the people in the community. We didn't know the people in the community. He did. And he said, okay, we need to have so and so here and we need to have this person here. The people we knew were the experts, right? We knew the scientists and we knew all of those folks, but we didn't know the people in the community. So by having Curtis there was he was the key to the success of our forums and of this work and us addressing that particular issue. So to sum this up, I would say having a partner and finding champions in the community are critical when you're first getting started, maybe critical throughout the entire process.
Oh, thanks so much, Linda. Betty, would you be able to talk about this from a community-focused standpoint as
Sure.
well?
And Linda, that was the perfect lead in because you're saying you need to get the community involved. And a lot of the work that I've done starts in the community, and we want to get the campuses involved because that kind of a partnership is just so rich. So I can say that, you know how when they show you something, they say, don't try this at home. I would say, don't try this alone. Because one person in one organization is going to make an impact, but not nearly what you can. And the actual capacity building and the longevity of the work has to be uh, like owned by many, many parts of the community and maybe not just one sector. So I would say the first thing is you really want to try to find people that have a common interest with what you're trying to do. That doesn't mean that they're civic engagement organizations. They don't have to have the same mission as you, but if their interest is in working together on a public problem or just being able to address it in some way, if their interest is in and their belief is that people have a right and they should have the opportunity to share their views, talk to other people, learn more about an issue, and then see what can be done about it. So when we were starting, I'll just give you West Virginia as an example. We tried to build a statewide coalition because we were working statewide, and then people replicated that at the local level. So it started with a civic engagement organization, like many of you run on your own college campuses. So we started there, but we developed partners, and one of the partners was the United Ways. United Ways are throughout West Virginia. They aren't civic engagement organizations per se, but they're working on all kinds of issues that impact the public. That's their whole mission is to help people improve lives in their own communities. So that was the common ground there. They said, yes, we'll be a part of that. Then we approached a media partner, and which became an incredible partner, West Virginia Public Broadcasting. And I talked to the director there, and I was explaining what it is that we're trying to do. And he said, we absolutely want to be a part of it. And I wasn't going to tell him, I wasn't going to ask him, oh, we want you to publicize this for us. We were saying, can you be a part of this with us? And he said, yes. And here's what he said. He said, our mission as a statewide broadcasting network is to tell West Virginia's story. This will help us tell West Virginia's story. We'll hear what people are talking about, what they're thinking about. Journalists will listen in, we'll write stories about this. This is going to help enhance our mission. So there was the common connection with West Virginia Public Broadcasting. We went to local business associations. They want the communities in which they're running their businesses to be thriving. So there's their interest. And obviously, they have other ones as well. We talked to a community development organization. Their whole idea is to help communities take on projects to make them better. They said, yeah, once people talk and they're ready to move to action, then we can partner with them in terms of some of the action skills that we can bring to them, even some of the resources we can bring to them. So you just kind of have to dig a little bit to find out what other partners that you can have. And the main thing is that you want a group of partners that can reach out to people who are not normally included, people who don't normally participate, people who are affected by the issues that they are often left out of discussing.
You're really well said, Betty, and gets at a lot of the talk happening right now in the chat as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of moving to concrete examples here, do you have any particular stories of actions that have resulted from your work that really stand out to you most? And, for the people involved with those actions, can you describe just the impact that that had on them in terms of civic efficacy? And Betty, after you, Linda and Alberta, feel free to cut in.
Well, I have some slides that go with mine. So should we, or do you want me to wait a while for that, Christine?
I think Dawn is on it.
Oh, great. Okay. So this, I mean, I'm going to use the West Virginia, the What's Next America, structure to explain how this worked. But these actions can occur in all kinds of different ways. In What's Next America approach, it's what we were just talking about. What Alberto and Linda and I were all saying is you need to reach out, you need to engage other people. So you start out with a diverse planning team. And then as much outreach as you possibly can. And it's not a one-time thing with outreach. You have to continue it. Who's not in the room? Who else could we invite? Who else could you bring to the next discussion? That kind of thing. What we've also learned and have seen so often is that talking about an issue, even if it's a great discussion, talking about it one time for 90 minutes is probably not going to let you go deep enough, broad enough, or be inclusive enough to actually determine particular actions. You might determine, some that are more direct, but in general, we're talking about a series of discussions, not a single discussion. And that's where the where are we now, where do we want to go, how do we want to get there questions fit in. And then a wide range of actions come out of that. I'll show you some examples here in just a second. But this takes more discussion. In West Virginia, somebody called them action summits, and so other people started calling them action summits, and so now they're just kind of known that way. But after communities have a chance to talk together, to set directions, to prioritize actions after they work through deliberatively what ones are the most important, then bring them back together to say, okay, who's going to work on what? Always again, keeping your arms open, knowing that there are other people out there that you can bring into the mix. So I have a few examples to show you. This was our What's Next West Virginia. We created a discussion guide. Had to have mountains in it. And if you're in West Virginia, you got to put those there. We also really encourage people to localize the discussion to their community. So even though today we're talking about in the context of action, but also the example of What's Next America, when you're talking about this in your community, you're not talking about the entire nation of America. You're going to be talking about it as it applies to your community. That's what we did in West Virginia. So everybody localized the discussions to what they wanted to talk about in their own community. So we had a What's Next Mid-Ohio Valley. That's not only part of West Virginia, that's part of Ohio too. What's Next Huntington, one of our larger cities. What's Next Clay County, one of our rural, very small communities. What's Next Southern West Virginia. Eastern Panhandle, we have two panhandles here in West Virginia, and the counties there's small counties in each that kind of stick together. So it made sense for them to look at the Eastern Panhandle instead of just one part of it. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about what's next after the flood in a second. Okay, so this one was sponsored by a group of people in Buchanan, West Virginia. West Virginia Wesleyan was one of the key drivers of that, and it came from the business department at West Virginia Wesleyan. It was the dean of the business school that was really the champion for this on her college campus, lots of other community-based partners, and they talked about what was important in their own area. Now, some of the things that they talked about had to do with how the community was changing because of what was happening in this community was natural gas extraction. So they talked about ways to keep jobs and protect the environment at the same time. They worked with the local companies that were doing what was called, people might know the term of fracking, in order to get the positive aspects of it without as much of the environmental issues that were coming up. I can go into a lot of detail on that one, but I want to show you a few other examples quickly too. This one was actually another team of partners that included the United Way, but it was sponsored at the University of Charleston. These people were talking about job loss. Because they're in southern West Virginia and the coal industry has lost tons of jobs in recent years. And there are people who feel that we should have less use of coal. Some people think we should have more use of coal, but nobody thinks that people should be out of work. And so this was about helping people think through. So they looked at various job opportunities. They brought other kinds of job opportunities into some of the communities. They helped train people to do more work with local resources, including really had a lot to do with helping farmers. They took actions in that area. This is another example would be Northern Panhandle. What they were really worried about was how young people in West Virginia, we tend to have, if people are going to leave the state, they tend to be the younger people in the state. Older people tend to stick around. I'm an example. I've been here for decades. But they were trying to find ways to make the Wheeling area more vibrant, more had more opportunities for young people. So they began all kinds of activities in that community that were led by young people. So it wasn't just like, how do we keep the young people here? It's like, young people, how can we help you do what it is you need to do in this area? Okay. The next one. Um, this one was in the Mid-Ohio Valley. There, they were really focusing on the increased number of people that were coming in that were unhoused. That number was growing and growing, and they didn't understand why. And so they really said, we're going to focus on the needs of people that have no housing. The shelters were overflowing, and they began to go out into the community and find out reasons why. They began to do a lot of collaborative work with agencies to try to meet the immediate needs. They began to work with surrounding counties to see if they could help them develop the capacity to have more shelters and more support, because a lot of people were coming to Parkersburg because they didn't have anything else. Their strategy was actually adopted by the state of West Virginia because it really helped more people come into the mix. I think I have a couple more examples here. I'll just say quickly. In Huntington, they were really looking at the influx of opiates in the area, and they really decided to start doing a lot more with not just with education, but for support for people with addiction. They developed new community centers that helped with detox and addiction recovery programs. And in general, they really raised the public level of understanding about what it was to have an opiate addiction in that area. And then the last one, I think it's the last one. Oh, Clay County, they were fantastic. The Clay County group wanted to really highlight the special talents that they had in their area. They began working on festivals and fairs and more things to do with their local resources. What they ended up doing, they were so proud of what they'd come up with. They got these buses. And they just came down to the Capitol in West Virginia and the next slide will show you they loaded up on their buses, and then the next slide, you won't see this usually, but they brought the steel drum corps from the local high school into the rotunda, and they played these great songs. And you can imagine a marble rotunda, how much noise they made. Everybody in the Capitol knew they were there that day, but what they were there for was to talk to their local legislators about the support they needed to do some of the things that they were taking on. And then finally, I mentioned that I was going to talk to you a little bit about, they're saying goodbye. In 2016, we go back just one on that one, Dawn. Sorry, I'm kind of going back and forth here. They decided to call their initiative "What's Next After the Floods." In 2016, we had what were called the 1,000-year floods here in West Virginia. We have floods every spring. There's a lot of flooding because of the narrow, what we call hollers between the mountains. But this was just a really dramatic thing. We were working with the Episcopal Diocese, and they thought, FEMA's here. Other support agencies are here to help people rebuild, help people get food. Churches were amazing in terms of the donations they did, but no, they weren't having an opportunity to say, well, what's next after this? Once we get through this incredibly traumatic experience, how do we want to rebuild our community, not just physically, but socially and all the other ways? And so this next picture just shows you, we came together at this tiny community center in Rupert, in the part that was flooded. You can't see it in the picture, but around about the level of the heads, there's the watermark where the water had been just 2 weeks ago in that building. And they came together and they were looking at designing a plan for what they wanted to do when they got through. It became this whole thing called the Meadow River Valley Coalition, and they did remarkable work. They even raised money and became a nonprofit that was able to work on that. So it's a range of it. I don't know if there's anything more there, Dawn. I think we're probably at the last one. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Thank you so much, Betty. What a wide array of actions, and love the visuals. Turning over to Linda, do you want to talk through any specific examples of actions that that really stick out to you? And then we can go to Alberto and then Dawn for some information about what's next America.
Yeah, no, I don't like following Betty.
Oh, I already
No.
had those slides ready, Linda, for another reason.
Yeah, no,
why not
I
use
don't.
them, right?
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. One, I have a couple that come to mind. I told you a little bit about the one with the water quality issue. And one of the outcomes of that one was we found a scientist, not at University of Florida, but at a different organization, who was actually doing research on fish toxicity in those water bodies. And so we were able to have a town hall meeting with her and the participants from those forums to talk about her research. Well, she discussed how she was challenged in the research to find the fish that she needed to test, right? And so we somehow came up with the idea to do a youth fishing clinic where we brought in youth. This was a historic Black community, and we brought in youth, and we were at a park along the Indian River Lagoon. We found a bunch of donations. We got tackle boxes donated and fishing poles donated, and a local community member who was a fisherman, a big fisherman, not just with a pole, but Florida style fishing, right? And he had a bunch of fresh pompano that he had caught. And he said, I'll tell you what, he says, I'll cook fish sandwiches and we'll give the kids fish sandwiches. And if they don't like fish, we'll have hot dogs. And for every fish they catch, they get a fish sandwich or a hot dog, and they get to keep the tackle boxes and they get to keep the fishing rods, and we had a bunch of other things for them too. So they had a whole bunch of giveaways, and the scientist was there too in her organization, and she got several fish that she was able to use for her research. The research is still ongoing, so we don't have the outcome yet. But those children learned a little bit about fishing, something they'd never done anyway, right? And they learned about that, and they got to try to eat fish, and just all the things. So it was really successful. Another example that I'll share is a little more recent. We're working on food access here in Florida. It's a big issue, and I know it's an issue in a lot of other states as well. And so how do we get food to people who need it, right? And so we did a forum, we held a forum with people who are working on this issue in a county, and a lot of enthusiasm. I remember there were two women there who ran a food pantry at a Catholic church. And before the forum started, they were sharing with me that they were really struggling to find food, to have in the pantry. And, where can we get food? And I didn't know. I don't live in that county. So, of course, I didn't know. So maybe somebody here will know, and we'll get some answers for you before we all depart. Well, lo and behold, in the forum was a gentleman whose job is to go around to local farms and grocery stores and what have you, and he picks up all the produce that he's allowed to pick up, all the excess that would ordinarily go to waste, and he gives that to food pantries throughout the county. Well, the two women didn't know about him, and he didn't know about their pantry. So just in that forum, we were able to make a connection there, and even though it diverted us a little bit during the deliberation, it also was so valuable that it was one of those things you just can't stop that conversation, right? And the food pantry ladies were so excited, and so fast forward, and here they are now. They've got ample food, and this person, this guy who's collecting the food, has another customer, and so it was just a really good outcome. And I'll turn it over to Alberto.
Thanks, Linda. I also had a few slides. I'll try and get through them in a couple of minutes. But more than anything, to show how our approach is often looking at scaffolding action at different levels so that participants can think about what the next steps look like for them individually, as well as the group that they're part of. And then, depending on the nature of the issue, whether or not we're making advisory recommendations to an organization with regards to policies or practices, or making recommendations to some authority like the university president or the governor or the legislature. Some of this comes from what I feel is like convergent evolution of deliberative dialogue practices that I've seen both with NIFI itself and here in Arizona, we have an organization called Arizona Town Hall that has a long history of, since the 60s, convening the community on statewide policy issues. Originally, that focus was developing consensus recommendations based on deliberation to give to legislators that were then turned into legislation or policy proposals. Over time, it got harder and harder for Arizona Town Hall to sustain the engagement with legislators. They just were less and less likely as after the mid 90s to come to the deliberations and to do anything with the outcomes of those. So they evolved to a model of more coming up with the consensus recommendations and then going back out into communities all over the state to say, okay, this is what the participants have said we need to do to fix our failing schools or to diversify our economy or to ensure a sustainable sustainable water supply. How do we implement these recommendations here in Sierra Vista or in Kingman or Phoenix or Flagstaff? And who should be involved? And what are individual actions we can take? And so on and so forth. It's been a very successful model. And so we've adopted that at a lot of different scales where we'll look at how can we design our deliberative experience so that we close with some meaningful ways for people to think about actions they can take individually, as well as potentially group actions and making recommendations. I'll skip that. We sometimes will start by revisiting what's been recorded, the notes that have been taken down on the flip charts, and having people give people some time to revisit the highlighted suggested actions and outcomes, and then prioritize those. But also have partners with us that can provide ways for people to get involved in individual advocacy by reaching out to elected officials and other kinds of authorities. As a result of this discussion, I've learned this, and I want to encourage you to do that, or ways that you can get involved through volunteerism or service or supporting an organization that's involved in the effort and things like that. Then the group reflections similarly have the group process what's been said, what's been done, maybe come up with a pledge or an action plan. This middle picture was from a process we called civic renewal, where this was a result of some really traumatizing things that happened in our state, where we wanted to re-inspire people about their ability of ordinary people to make our communities work better and restore civic health. So we talked through three themes of civic hope. What do we hope for our country? Civic faith. What do we believe about democracy? And civic love. How do we restore the bonds of our societies? And so we had worksheets for each of those themes for people to answer some questions individually, discuss them in their small tables, and then turn those into pledges that they would then sign and then present to the large group. And it really led to a lot of beautiful things happening. But you have to, in all of that process, really have very clear ideas about who's responsible for, if anyone is responsible for supporting that next steps action taking process. Let me see, just move forward here. Some other quick examples. We were involved with working with the city of Mesa on redesigning a park. And so we convened some forums with people gathered and just thought very broadly and with no restrictions what kind of a park they wanted. And the planning and zoning folks were really wary of our process because they expected normal people to come up with unrealistic ideas and to ask for things that couldn't be delivered. But what we did was we had people think creatively and then and draw and create and imagine their ideal park on these big maps, and then answer some questions about what their designs represented. What were the key principles or values with regard to how people use parks and what they value in their parks. So it didn't matter how unrealistic their plans were. What mattered was that the planning and zoning folks got a real crystal clear idea of what people wanted out of their parks and how they use them. And that turned into one of the best parks in the country. Riverview Park in Mesa is a jewel. And if you go there, it looks like the things people said that they wanted. The old folks wanted a lot of walkable paths with minimal rise so that they could get around the park with their walkers or canes without obstructions. They wanted a lot of bathrooms. And this park has a lot of wonderful walkable paths and bathrooms. The younger folks wanted fun things to do. So there's really beautiful, how do you call it? Playgrounds and climbing things and water features and stuff like that. Young people wanted a park that didn't look like every other generic park, and this park is definitely not that. We worked with the governor's office and we worked with the tribes in our state to convene our 22 tribes and community colleges and universities to talk about what works and doesn't work for tribal students and turn those into actionable recommendations that we then presented back to the universities, colleges, and tribes. And people then were able to divide up responsibility for implementation on that. We worked with the governor's office on aging, anticipated aging issues for our state and involved all of the executive branches of state government to be the audience for what the participants had to say for that. So they were in the room listening, not participating, but taking notes on everything that the participants had to say, their ideas, their challenges, and turning those into actionable plans. So there's a lot of ways to take what people have to say and provide ways where it feels meaningful and really has tangible outcomes with organizations that are positioned to do something as a result of it. But I think wherever possible, when you can provide tiered opportunities to turn the talk into different kinds of action, individual group, and policy recommendations, it really makes the whole process feel really important and that it's made a difference. And those people are then more likely in the future to continue to stay involved and engaged.
Alberto, those examples are so inspiring, and the structure you provide there is really, really helpful. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks.
So yeah, as we kind of wrap up the Q&A portion, I would love to turn it over to Dawn to talk through some of the tools that What's Next America offers in terms of helping people move from talk to action, like we've been talking about, and then we'll have time for some Q&A and discussion afterwards as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know we said that we're kind of saying we'd stop at the hour, so if anyone needs to go, we get it. But we'll just be a couple minutes, like two minutes, kind of sharing some tools and resources here, and then get right into any question and answer that or discussion that might folks might want to have. So thanks for your flexibility. But yeah, so I wanted to make sure we shared out the and first of all, also thank you so much to all of our speakers and just sharing the sort of incredible, diversity of ways that this can look and sort of how, just different models and tools and approaches that can really help communities and campuses and all that move towards some kind of action together. So thank you so much again. But yeah, so I wanted to share some of these resources that we have are available. They're all available on our website, which the QR code is there, or it's what'snextamerica.com. We have three versions of participant guides for anyone who hasn't heard yet, but we've got the sort of community guide, a higher education version, and a K-12 or youth version. So just for different contexts that you might be working in. All of them sort of walk through those types of three questions we were talking about before. And we have a planning guide for actually people who are organizing these initiatives, other toolkits to help with media connections, also organizing. I'll get to that in a second. And a sort of a slate of workshops and trainings, community practice, which I mentioned before, and some other resources that help with related work. Specifically, right now we're running workshops on a values exercise. Martine Carcassonne, one of our partners, right, is some of you may know, is running those. And we'll run another series, I think, in July. So anyhow, that's sort of just the broad strokes here. I'm gonna kind of not really go through these slides, but I wanted to point you to this. This QR code is planning sheets that we have. When we talk about moving from talk to action, as our speakers kind of talked about, a lot of that work, starts in that organizing phase of getting people connected and connecting with the people in the community who are connected with the people you actually want to talk to, right? So planning sheets to kind of help walk through that process, especially with a team these are Google Docs, and so they can sort of be collaborative tools in case that's helpful. They'll be available on our website as well. And I'm going to skip that slide, but I did want to, just again mention the planning guide has a lot of resources that's available on the website, including if you're sort of thinking about a what's next approach. Guides, sample agendas for action summits is something that has been, requested and asked about. So I wanted to mention that we have that as well. This is just these are people who have expressed interest in What's Next America already, as well as people who are thinking about doing and actually already doing What's Next America initiative. So if you have any interest in the work and want to add your city or town to the map, as hey, I might be interested in this in the future, feel free to hit the QR code there and add yourself to the map. And I think, yeah, the QR code on the right there, at least on my screen, it's on the right, is for the email list sign up for. So if you just want to sort of stay in touch with us, get updates on workshops that are coming up and all of that, feel free to add yourself there. And I think I'll just stop screen sharing here so we can get to any questions and answers that people might have. Yeah, so any questions, thoughts, reflections that anyone might have for our kind of speakers or for each other, anything like that?
I feel rejuvenated. I'm excited. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that I was here today to be a part of this. I saw the little blurb come up on my computer and I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to do that. So I'm really glad that I was here to be in community with all of you.
Any other thoughts before I'll give just a minute here before we conclude? All right. Well, thank you all so much for taking time to kind of be with us today. And we are looking forward to connecting with you in the future, if possible, continuing to learn together and most importantly, do this good work. So that you all are doing. So appreciate it. And thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
I think it went well. I stopped
Yeah.
recording.
You did a fantastic job and keeping up with everything. I thought having, even though we